Leader Mark Carney was in Vaughan, Ontario this morning with a pitch to boost housing construction. But before heading to Georgetown, Ontario for a meet and greet event at a pub.
Our goal is to double the pace of housing construction to almost 500,000 new homes every single year. Homes you can afford to buy. Homes that are more sustainable and cost less to live in. Homes made right here with Canadian ingenuity, Canadian labor, Canadian products, including mass timber.
Carney says a Liberal government will get back in the business of building homes. He'd do this by creating Build Canada Homes, a public organization that partners with the private sector to develop affordable housing. The CBC's Olivia Stefanovich has more. Olivia.
David, Liberal leader Mark Carney unveiled his signature housing policy, a plan to double the pace of home building in this country by building up to 500,000 new houses per year. Now, Carney says the federal government will be able to do this by offering tens of billions of dollars worth of loans and grants under a new standalone entity. And while he tried to keep the focus on his announcement, much of his press conference was overshadowed by questions about Paul Chiang, a Liberal candidate running for re-election in the Greater Toronto area, who suggested that people should turn in a Conservative candidate in another riding called Joe Tay to the Chinese consulate and collect a bounty that's out for him.
The comments were deeply offensive. This is a terrible lapse of judgment by Mr. Chiang. He has apologized for those comments. He has apologized directly now to the person that he mentioned, apologized directly to him yesterday.
In a statement, Tay says Chiang made an unsolicited attempt to contact him, then posted on social media that he apologized. Tay says no apology is sufficient and he wants the Liberals to drop Chiang as a candidate, a call back by the Liberals' political opponents and dozens of Hong Kong organizations, David.
Okay, thank you, Olivia. That's the CBC's Olivia Stefanovich in Georgetown, Ontario. Well, both the Conservative and NDP leaders are condemning Carney's decision to keep Chiang on the ballot. Have a listen.
It shows that Carney is more interested in pleasing Beijing because they lent him $250 million for his company. He is compromised. I have never in my life seen a Prime Minister unwilling to protect a Canadian citizen against a foreign government that wants to take his life through a bounty.
Ultimately saying that for the folks out there that are worried and afraid, the folks that are living with that constant fear, you know what? You're less important to me, and what's more important to me is my party. He's putting his party ahead of his country in that case. I think that's wrong. And I think Canadians should find that wrong as well.
Okay, this feels like a really good place to start with the power panel. They're standing by. Lisa Raitt is a former Conservative cabinet minister. Here with me in the studio, Vandana Cotter was an advisor to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Brad Levine is a former national campaign director for the NDP. And Rob Russo is the Canada correspondent for The Economist. It's good to see you all. Vandana, the housing policy was supposed to be a big part of the campaign, a big pitch today, and I got walked all over by this Paul Chiang situation. Why would Mark Carney keep him after what he did?
Well, I think his comments were incredibly stupid and egregious. It sounds a lot like locker room talk, like a joke. And I think despite all that, I think what Mr. Carney was focusing on is the fact that Mr. Chiang has spent 30 years in the York Region Police Force. He also served as part of the Diversity Inclusion Office there. So he did work with, there's a lot of space between racialized communities and law enforcement sometimes. So he worked at building bridges. So he's done a lot of work in that community. And I think the way he sees it is that as much as this was a stupid, egregious error in judgment, that it shouldn't eclipse the good work he has done. And, I think really it's up to the people of Markham-Unionville to decide now. Lisa,
everything Mark Carney said today as to why he should keep Paul Chiang on the ballot was also a reason why Paul Chiang should have known better. 30 years as a cop, worked in DEI, parliamentary secretary, MP from the community. I mean, what do you make of his decision not to turf his candidate?
Well, maybe he should start with a condemnation about the fact that a foreign entity has put a bounty on the head of a candidate for our election. Let's start with that one. I would have liked to have heard something about that, more than about whether or not this was a teachable moment, I think is the term that was used by somebody. This is a serious matter. A bounty's on the head of somebody who's running in our federal election, and the Liberal member of Parliament thinks it's okay to make a joke out of it. Not a joke. Not a joke. I mean, when Donald Trump does stuff like this and he says things that are incredibly outrageous and egregious, we all say, well, he's not being literal, he's being figurative, but still he shouldn't be doing that. This is exactly the same thing. He said something incredibly egregious, incredibly not just stupid, dangerous, because who knows what other people are going to actually think about this. The fact that there's a bounty, as I said many times already, is an affront to our democracy. And it should be taken as seriously as the matter is, not just to dust it off and say, move along, everybody.
Brad, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, when a candidate does something so egregious, the leader has two choices. You either fire him, and you have to fire him right away. The second alternative that you have is you stick with him. And if you stick with him, you're going to have to put up with the punches that are going to come from not only the opposition, like I know that the Conservative and NDP war rooms are cranking up on this candidate, but also if there's vulnerability about Mr. Carney and his any relationships that he may have with China. To Lisa's point about the issue of the bounty, that's obviously a good one. But the question is for Mr. Carney, where is the bar? If somebody can say this so egregious and still be good enough to stand with his slate as a Liberal, then where would he draw the line? I don't believe that you are completely innocent of any of comments that you make today by the fact of what you've done in the past. You can still show horrible judgment. And what this has done is given the war rooms. How many days can the opposition parties make hay over this egregious statement? And will the public tune in? This is day 9 of the campaign. Mr. Carney appears in the opening days. Certainly he's got some momentum that the polls are showing, but the drip, 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 mistake after mistake, whether it's getting Polytechnique wrong, whether it's getting his candidate's name wrong, whether it's getting bad French translation on his announcement today, or whether it's keeping a candidate that many Canadians may feel that is outside of the mainstream. There is an underlying current of concern over foreign interference. I don't think it's front of mind ballot question, but the question becomes, how will the drip, drip, drip affect Mr. Carney, a brand new politician and somebody untested in an election?
Rob, what do you think?
I would begin with a simple question. If I had said that on the air, on this show, would you have me back? I think
maybe to explain yourself, but not as a regular.
That's right.
You know?
That is the answer to the question. You would not have me back, and if I was still running this place, I wouldn't be back.
Yeah.
So I think, to Brad's point, we're in day 4. How long will they continue with this? I don't think that they can continue much further. They haven't answered the question about Chandra Arya. They haven't answered questions about Hang Dong, why they were not allowed to run. Why is this guy allowed to run and they're not allowed to run? Becomes the next part of it. This is going to go on. I think inevitably he will probably be asked to step aside or he'll offer to do it. If that happens, it will be because of politics rather than principle. He had a moment here to actually establish principle. And the other mistakes that Brad talked about can be explained away by a tenuous grasp of French. This is a deliberate choice, and I think it's the first own goal that Mark Carney's made.
So Vandana, what is it that drives Mr. Carney to make this choice? Like, what is it about Paul Chiang that makes him untouchable in this circumstance, that he wasn't fired? What is so special here?
I don't think it's an untouchable thing. I think it sounds like he said, I made a stupid error, I was joking around. It's not funny, as to Lisa's point. Like, this is a bounty on a Canadian citizen. Like, that's not okay. But I think it wasn't something as egregious as actual foreign interference or any other number of things that can cause an MP to have to leave that I think could be worse. I think it shows a lapse of judgment, absolutely. So he's probably not going to be a PS again. I can make a guess if that happens. But I think Mr. Carney sees some people as fallible, and like that's how it is. And I think this is narrow judgment. But I also think like learning from the cancel culture of the years before, and I was a key person in that too. Like, I was ready to judge any time, but should one stupid mistake override all the good things he does for a broader community? So York Region as a whole knows him really well. He knows people, he speaks Punjabi, Urdu, Chinese. He connects so many people. He has so much goodness to him. Should be punished for this, because then that's his legacy. And is that fair too? I think he's definitely learned a lesson. I think it definitely shows bad judgment, and we'll see what happens to Mr. Chiang. But I think Mr. Carney just kind of sees him as this is a mistake, and we will move forward.
Is that the context, though? This was meant to be a joke?
I think so. I mean, I'm guessing it is. I don't have, like, I'm guessing that's what was said and that's what understood. I didn't hear the clip from Ming Pao, but from friends who read and understand and listen in Chinese, that's what they kind of came off as.
Lisa, I mean, what do you think? There have been issues, right? Like Chandra Arya, there were a lot of issues around him, apparently, that led to his disqualification. Han Dong, it's never really been explained why he wasn't allowed to run, because he kind of got cleared on a lot of the big allegations against him to a large degree by David Johnson and Justice Og. But here he has been replaced, but Paul Chiang stays.
Paul Chiang should do the right thing and fall on his sword for his party. The mere fact that he's still hanging on by his fingernails to this member of parliament seat, I think is indicative of the fact that he's not thinking about the bigger team. I don't know what's possessing Mark Carney to be happy about having to answer that question over and over again today. And if he thinks that's going to go away before Mr. Chiang actually leaves the ballot, then he's sorely mistaken. It's not going to be. The context of this is serious. The context is 4 Canadian citizens were executed. We learned were executed by China recently. We know that we had 2 Michaels who were kept in deplorable conditions on trumped up charges for a period of time. This isn't lost on us that it's a serious matter. And it's not outside the realm of possibility that somebody could take this seriously, that this was an actual, a dog whistle. Somebody's supposed to go out there and do this and clear the way. Regardless of what his intention was, as to whether or not it was supposed to be funny, he sure as hell should know better, especially given his years of being a police officer, protecting people around him. And he certainly doesn't seem to understand it. I think that nothing less of him resigning, taking it of his own volition to resign, is the proper thing to do in this case.
Brad, there's no indication that's going to happen. And I just wonder if part of the calculation here is the belief that events will just overtake this. Right. Tomorrow, the consumer carbon tax goes away, comes off gas prices. On Wednesday, it's Liberation Day in the United States, and whatever Donald Trump is going to do, Donald Trump is going to do. And the focus will shift there and away from there.
More expensive car day in the United States on Wednesday. And that's exactly the calculation. It's how many cycles do we lose? So if you take a 28-day campaign, you're spending, about $700,000, maybe $800,000 a day. If you get knocked off your daily message, that's $800,000 of the central campaign's money down the drain. So the calculation here is this enough for people to care? So if he loses today's cycle, and the top of the news is that he's defending his candidate with these comments, then they wake up and they'll see the papers, and then they'll check social. And then if tomorrow night they lose another cycle, then the quiet word will go back to the candidate to say, the leader's stuck behind you, but you got to end this bleeding. And then they'll ask him to resign. That's the way it'll happen. It won't be Mr. Chiang coming to this conclusion himself. It'll be the central campaign quietly talking to him off to the side, saying the Prime Minister would appreciate your resignation to stop this, so he can get back on to what Mr. Carney wants to talk about, which is not this. So right. that I believe is the calculation.
I am not convinced, based on my conversation since Saturday, that is going to happen. I don't know, Rob. It seems like once Carney said he has my confidence today, then they're in for a penny, in for a pound on this one.
Along with the enigma of the Sphinx, this will be one of the questions that people will be asking after this campaign, should the Liberals stumble. Let me ask another question, though. Okay. What if something untoward did happen to Mr. Tay? How would the Liberals feel about it then? Would they have regretted not taking the action that a lot of people say that they should be taking now? I think that they would. So get it out of the way. And let me put that into some context for you. Mr. Tay runs a YouTube channel where they feature reporting on some human rights abuses in Hong Kong. Really, do you want to make a joke about somebody like that who is taking risks already with his own personal safeties in order to advance a very difficult human rights agenda in China? I don't think you want to be taking those kinds of risks.
Yeah, Vanda, just last word to you to wrap this up. I mean, do you think there could be, as Brad laid out, these quiet conversations where Mr. Chiang ultimately makes a decision? My sense, is they're going to just go ahead and ride it out. I mean, do you think there could be an alternative path to get him off the ballot?
So in most cases, I would say Brad is right. That is how campaigns work.
Yeah. Yes,
I don't think
I agree.
this is going to happen, and I think it's just a different leader. I think Mr. Carney really, truly wanted to hear the facts, and I think he understood them the way he was told. And I think he just feels like, okay, well, I can forgive a mistake, and this is a bad day, and we'll have to move forward. And I don't think he's thinking in a political sense of like, maybe we'll find another way around. I think he's a man who sticks to his principles. I don't think you're going to see a lot of wavering.
Paul Chiang. In January, Chiang told a Chinese language media news conference that people could cash in if they turned Zhou Te into the Chinese consulate in Toronto. Te is running for the Conservatives in the GTA riding of Don Valley North, and Te says Chiang must be fired for his remarks. But Liberal leader Mark Carney said Chiang would remain a Liberal candidate.
The comments were deeply offensive. This is a terrible lapse of judgment by Mr. Chiang. He is a veteran policeman. Mr. Chiang is a veteran policeman with more than a quarter century of service to his community. 28 years of defending rights in this community, and he will continue with his candidacy going forward.
Later today, other party leaders came out against the decision to keep Chiang as a candidate.
And for Mark Carney to say that I'm going to accept this candidate really sends a message that that type of commentary ultimately is acceptable, because he's not removing him as a candidate. Ultimately saying that for the folks out there that are worried and afraid, the folks that are living with that constant fear, you know what? You're less important to me, and what's more important to me is my party.
Well, it is a teachable moment. It teaches us that Mark Carney will never stand up for Canada. If Mark Carney won't stand up for a Canadian against this foreign hostile regime now, how could we ever expect him to stand up for Canada after the election?
But it isn't just political leaders voicing criticism about the Liberal Party keeping Chiang as a candidate. Numerous organizations issued a joint statement condemning Paul Chiang. Cheuk Kwan is the co-chair of the Toronto Association for Democracy in China, which is one of the signatory organizations of that statement, and he joins me now. Cheuk Kwan, it's good to see you again. Thank you for being here, sir.
Hello, David.
I take it from your statement you agree with Mark Carney that those comments were deeply offensive, but I also take it you do not agree with his decision to say the apology is enough. I mean, what are your thoughts on what Paul Chiang said and what he said in his defense?
Well, my speculation is this whole Paul Chiang issue, which we brought up to the English press, is basically a tip of the iceberg of what we've been looking at long time, is foreign interference, and also the transnational repression, which is pretty obvious by having that $1 million bounty on Zhou Te. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about two issues here. The TNR, transnational repression, is pretty obvious. It's evidence proof that this Zhou did receive that $1 million bounty. But the thing about Paul Chiang was that, sure, it may be a joke, it may be misspoken, or it just may be a grave error, but that doesn't explain the fact that why a sitting MP and somebody running for a federal election would come out and say this to the press, albeit as a Chinese language press.
So Zhou Te has a bounty on his head. It's for 1 million Hong Kong dollars, as I understand it, which is about 170,000 Canadian, and it's for his activism opposing what's happened in Hong Kong since the Chinese takeover. The comments from Paul Chiang, I have racked my brain, Cheuk Kwan, to try to figure out what he was doing, because he's an MP, he's a police officer for decades. All the things Mark Carney said about him making him a good candidate are also reasons why he should have known better than to make those comments. I mean, do you think it was just a joke? Do you think he's complicit with trying to, push a Chinese? How do you view it? I can't wrap my head around it.
My first reaction was shock, and my second reaction was surreal. But I think deep down you have to look at it. The fact that there is a lot of China interference, and we cannot rule out the fact that this is something that's been affecting him as well. Mm-hmm. And he said what he said because he firmly believes it. What's more interesting is that he's speaking to a Chinese language press conference.
Right.
And no, in a sense, he's hiding behind what we call a language, shield. In other words, the problem is that a lot of things being said to the Chinese press or being exposed in the Chinese press are not reported by the English Canada or French Canada. So in that sense, he felt safe that he could say this kind of thing because he was at that point was trying to tell people not to elect Zhou Tai because he's toxic in terms of being anti-China, and he's going to be a bad news in the parliament if you get him elected. So I think that's his message. So he's using this whole sort of whether you're pro-China or anti-China to be a black mark on Zhou Tai. So I would say that every time you drag China into our national politics, then you risk, offending people or worse, what I call committing something that is egregious.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding your analysis of it here, Cheuk, that you think this was brought up as a way to undermine Zhou Tai's candidacy by saying, look, you can't vote for this guy, he's got a bounty. You don't think Paul Chiang was really suggesting he be kidnapped, brought to the consulate, and turned in for the money? Am I understanding you correctly?
I don't think he's foolish enough to think that it's going to happen. But whether it's a joke or not, whether it's an off-the-cuff remark, a firm belief or not, that doesn't matter. The fact that you are a Canadian, you're a sitting politician, and you can say this, that to me is shocking.
You know, you and dozens of other groups have signed a letter calling for Paul Chiang to be removed as a candidate. Hong Kong Watch issued a letter to the RCMP commissioner suggesting that maybe these comments could border on a crime. I was thinking back to the last time you and I spoke. It was you and Kenny Chu, the Conservative candidate for Richmond-Steveston East, or Steveston-Richmond East, who had been a target of foreign interference, and you're both so happy because it was the findings of the OG report and they were now taking it seriously, and it feels like today you're back in that frustrated place before that. I mean, where do you think things stand today?
Well, as I told you earlier, I thought that the OG report is, to us, a little bit of a whitewash. She assigned no blame. She sort of say basically maybe one or two writings might be affected, but in general, the election is not affected. Right.
It was the foreign interference registry you were happy about. I confused the two, if I remember correctly. Right? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Foreign registry. This is something that we've been asking our government to do, to establish foreign agent registry. So in that sense, we were happy that Madame Oak had suggested that that should be established. But it always back to the kind of thing that we are dealing with. There's foot dragging in the government. There's a lot of work to be done to establish foreign agent registry. And it's too late now for this election. And this is something that we are now, quite worried about.
So I wonder, Cheuk Kwan, where does this leave things? Like, the Liberals seem intent to ride this out with Paul Chiang as their candidate in Markham-Unionville. From a very, nakedly political motivation, they think he's the best chance to win it, and it seems like he has some resonance in other communities around his riding. I mean, how do you think this affects things politically, with you, with those ridings where there is a fairly substantial Chinese-Canadian population?
I think anybody with an ounce of moral integrity should know enough to do the right thing. For Paul Chiang, he should resign. For the Liberal Party, they should think twice about, allowing him to run, politically or not. So in that sense, I think a lot of people are kind of trying to brush it off. And as you talk about in the previous segment, they're hoping this will go away. But I guarantee you, this won't go away. Because the Hong Kong diaspora, many of them in Canada and elsewhere in the world, is also facing kind of these kind of China harassment and threats, and this is real. It's not joke. And I could be somebody somewhere could just make a foolish move and say, "Oh, I'm just going to take out Zhou Tai and I'll go and claim $1 million bounty from the Chinese government." This is something that we are always worried about. The mad person that says, "Okay, I'll just get it," and whatever it is, it may be just harm, maybe just injury, but it could be all very serious.
So Cheuk Kwan, I've gone over time, but just one last question. Mark Carney spoke to Paul Chiang today and said he got an explanation and it was a mistake and he thinks Paul Chiang will learn from it. I don't know if you've spoken to Mark Carney, but what would you say to the Liberal leader if he were to seek your advice on what to do with his candidate?
It's a mistake, honest mistake or not, that's fine. But I think for the perception in the politics, perception is everything. And the perception we have right now of Prime Minister Carney is that he's not treating it as serious as many of us would like him to do.
Cheuk Kwan, the co-chair of the Toronto Association for Democracy in China. I want to thank you for your time today, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you.